Well, I was a musician first. I started when I was 5, actually playing organ, and then eventually switched to piano about age 10, and also played a little bit of percussion in college. And it was during college I started working on a business degree, and then decided that I wanted to kind of reclaim some more of my musical roots, and I shifted to a music degree. Did the first 2 years of my music degree, and then I went to New York and studied for a while. And while I was in New York, I decided that I really didn't want to do a performance career. I wanted to stay in the music industry, but I wanted to tie my business experience with that degree program and my music degree program. And I started doing a lot of searching through degree programs across the country and found a music business degree as an undergraduate degree at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. One of the courses that I took in my degree program was a music business seminar, and at every class period we had a representative from a different aspect of the music industry, and then after each class we then had to write a report on that element of the music industry. And while I was doing that, I was also developing more and more of a keen interest in orchestral music. Having spent most of my time doing solo repertoire, I was branching out, and it was through that interest that I started to steer a lot of my study toward orchestras, and decided from that point that that's where I wanted to be. And other than a few scenic side trips, this is where I've been ever since. You know, I had a different administrative role in San Antonio. I was the executive director, so I was essentially the chief operating officer of the institution. San Antonio had a lot of challenges. It's a smaller city than Houston. It's a smaller city than Baltimore, where I had been for 6 years before I went to San Antonio. And as the executive director, there were elements of the work that I was doing, interaction with the board, more interaction with the community, interaction with the staff on a broader scale, and with the orchestra on a broader scale, and also with the music director, which I didn't have as a full package in my prior experience in Baltimore and with the American Symphony Orchestra League Fellowship. So that really developed a lot of those skills and allowed me to think on a much broader scale than what is specifically happening on the stage with the orchestra and within my department. And I've brought a lot of what I was able to gain in San Antonio to this position, and I think it's actually helps me on a day-to-day basis as general manager to think more integrally how we can focus our efforts with those of the development department, the marketing department, artistic education, etc., to broaden the product that Houston can produce and build better connections within the community. I had been general manager in Baltimore, and as one of my orchestras in the fellowship, I had been here in Houston. So I had spent 15 weeks here in 1994. And Matthew and I worked a little bit together in San Antonio as well. Matthew was able to come over and spend a period working with us on a temporary basis, doing some artistic planning in San Antonio when we needed to fill a position quickly, and he brings all the qualifications to do that. So we'd known each other for a while and knew that we worked well together. And when Matthew moved up to executive director here, I had actually left the orchestra industry and had gone back to work with Northwest Airlines. I had worked with them for 10 years, or almost 10 years, in the late 80s and early 90s. And when the position opened here, from Matthew moving on, they started a search, and I was one of the people that they contacted. I was looking forward to getting back into the industry. I loved my work at Northwest, but I was missing the orchestra industry as well. And when Matt called, it made a lot of sense. It was an easy transition for my family. My wife was offered a position in Conroe, in the Conroe School District here in the Houston area. And she actually had that position before I decided to take this job. And for a lot of people that work with orchestras, the operational side has a real draw because we get to have so much contact with the musicians, so much contact with the concert product. For me, it doesn't feel like it's a step backward at all. It's a return to a larger orchestra where we have a broader scope of duties and a broader scope of product that we can offer to the community, and I really enjoy that. So for me, it's not a step backward at all. General manager positions differ slightly from orchestra to orchestra. In an orchestra of this size, we're considered a Group 1 orchestra based on our budget size. And in this orchestra specifically, really anything that happens on the stage, operationally with the orchestra, or with lighting, sound, placement of the orchestra on the stage, working with soloists and the music director and the musicians in the orchestra to figure out how all the components of the concert fit together. Anything in education and in outreach, all of those aspects fit into our department. So maintaining the master agreement, which is our contract with the musicians and the musicians union and the institution, making sure that everyone is abiding by that and working well together, negotiating that agreement, and developing the season along with the artistic staff and the music director, making sure that everything that we would like to do can actually be done and be done within the budget. The first thing we do when we know we're going to have an opening is we set up the committee, and it's a committee of musicians from the orchestra, and depending on whether it's a string player or a wind player, brass, percussion, etc., the composition of the committees are different. Every orchestra does this slightly differently. It's all internally negotiated as part of their master agreement or the contract between the institution and the musicians and the union. In our case, we have 7-member committees, and that committee is set up first. We start working on dates that will hold the audition as we look at the calendar for the next season. We have to find a place where we don't have rehearsals and concerts, but everyone's in town so that we can hold the auditions, and the music director needs to be present as well. So we develop that calendar, develop the repertoire that will be needed for the auditions. We then get the ad in the newspaper. And as everyone arrives, once we've gone through the resume process and all of that, we make sure that we keep people comfortable, get them individual spaces where they can warm up before they actually take their audition. The auditions are done behind a screen, so that at least until the final round, the people who are sitting on the committee don't have any idea who's actually taking each portion of the audition. They don't get copies of the resumes as part of the in-town portion of the auditions until the finals. Once we get to the final round, the screen can be removed, and the audition committee can see the resumes of who they're looking at. And everyone by this point has only made it to the finals based on their ability to play. And then within the final round, we hold, it's usually a slightly more elevated list of the most difficult repertoire. We go through that round. When everyone is done playing, we go into a closed setting, and the committee has an opportunity to vote and then to discuss who they would like to see get the position, and then they vote again. And usually at that point, we're able to declare a winner. When you come into an audition, be as prepared as you absolutely can be. It's always difficult to tell somebody to kind of relax and enjoy an audition process because they're very difficult. It's a very difficult way to select somebody to be in the orchestra. It's a difficult process for anyone to live through. You spend months usually preparing for an audition with specific excerpts, and sometimes you get 10 or 15 minutes to prove what you can do, and that's your only opportunity to say, I'm the one you should hire for this position. So be as prepared as you can be so that you can be as relaxed as you can be in the audition. Don't focus on what other people are doing. If you can hear elements of the auditions of the people ahead of you, don't worry about it. Sometimes you don't have to play every note perfectly. Committees are very fair in auditions, and you don't have to be that perfect person all the time. Certainly getting through the repertoire and playing it very cleanly is very important, but it's also important to play it musically. And just because you get every note perfect doesn't mean you're going to be the one to get the job. Be very honest with your resume. Be very clear with your resume. List opportunities that you've had, and those can include your background in education, who you've studied with, who you've played for, if you've won some other auditions at some point in your career, if you've been a finalist in an audition. And the other best advice that I have is set your resume up and then give it to somebody else to read, and see if that person who knows you feels like you're presenting yourself in the best light, if you've remembered all of those elements that will really highlight what you can do as a player and what you have done as a player. And get somebody to take a look at it, get a third person even to proofread it. Because while we're not going to judge somebody if there's something misspelled, etc., looking very professional and very prepared is always a good thing. Well, there's been a lot of innovation tried already. Some of it is from, for example, we have video screens in our hall now. They're not used for every program. We use them very selectively in a way that will not detract from the program, but only enhance it. Sometimes they're used to give close-ups of a large solo and an individual instrument in the orchestra. Sometimes they're used to play films or photos, etc., that have been composed and choreographed specifically to repertoire we're performing. Sometimes they're just focus on the soloist that week. Programming is changing. The way that we package subscriptions is changing. We've developed an American Expression series here, which is very different from both our classical and our pop season, looking to draw a completely new audience. We were finding that it has some appeal to what we would consider our traditional audiences as well, but they're starting to take effect, and we are bringing in a lot of new people who may not have thought to come to the symphony before. You also have to broaden your education programs to keep building your future for your audience of the future, tying in families, not just children, not just schools, and really taking a broad look at the variety of interests out there. We're even looking at the way musicians dress on the stage, what we package around a concert, what happens before the concert in the lobby or out on the plaza, what happens after the concert. All things that can enhance the full concert experience without necessarily changing what we do. We're always going to do Beethoven and Mozart and Mahler and Bruckner and Shostakovich. Those are core things that this symphony has to offer, and something we do very well. And you don't want to take all that innovation to change that, but a lot of times you want to preserve all of those really quality things you do and enhance what happens around it. And I think that's a way that we're going to draw in some new audiences, being kind of multi-sensory.